Sure enough, he made me jump in. And it was so cold. I remember being shocked at first. It was so freezing. And then I remember standing there and being like, oh, I'm actually okay. Like, this is okay.
You didn't die.
I didn't die. I didn't die. I was able to do this. And that's where I, remembered the phrase, I can do hard things.
Welcome to Beyond the Casebooks podcast, where we're redefining the road to law school. I'm Micah, your host, and in each episode, we dive into the unique and inspiring journeys of law students, graduates, and professionals who have navigated the twists and turns of the legal world. Whether you're dreaming of law school, currently in the thick of it, or reflecting on the path you've already walked, this podcast is for you. So let's explore the stories behind the casebooks and discover what it truly takes to succeed in the world of law. Hi, I'm Micah, and this is Beyond the Casebooks on the Online Law Coach, and where we talk about other people's unconventional and untraditional routes and ways into law school. And today we're going to talk with Megan. Megan, hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so glad for you to be on. We have been friends for a while, and we went to law school together, but you were ahead of me, so you've already taken the bar and passed. Let's get a little bit of your background, professional, a little bit personal stuff, just the basics, and then we're going to dive into the meat of your journey.
Okay.
So tell me what your education background first, like how you got that first.
Totally. So I did my undergrad, for my undergrad, I got a degree in English education. At the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I actually started out college with my major in psychology because I think I knew I wanted to help people. And so at the time I thought, psychology, maybe become like a therapist. But then I got into it, decided, I took my first psych class, thought, this isn't quite what I was looking for. But then I didn't really know what to do. And so I kind of just like, well, I'm good at English and I like teaching, so let's do English education. So that's what I got my degree in. But by my senior year, I just knew that wasn't really what I wanted to do. But I also knew I just needed a degree. So I graduated, got my degree, but then it was actually right after graduation that I started to think, I just can't picture myself teaching English to high schoolers or whoever for the next 30 plus years. And so I just started considering it. And growing up, I'd always thought about being a lawyer. And actually, people would always tell me, based off of my personality, like, oh, you should be a lawyer. Because I love to debate. I love to, I've always been, kind of confident. And so anyways, that idea had kind of come up again. And I thought, I could actually see myself doing that. Mm-hmm. And so, but not really knowing what to do, I just did a little bit of research and, my dad at the time was like, I paid for your undergrad, but that's it. Anything beyond this is on you. So I'm like, law school is pretty expensive. So how can I make this work?
Yeah.
And so I looked online and sure enough, I found an online law school, but it was unaccredited.
Okay.
But it was like $240 a month at the time. And I was like sold. I probably should have seen some like red flags, right? Yeah. But I was just like, perfect.
When you're paying for yourself, you first look at the price tag and then you see the quote.
I didn't even look into the school. I just thought, okay. But the problem with it was literally teach yourself. It was teach yourself law school. Okay. So there was no live classes. It was just, they gave you the case books. They gave you a syllabus and an outline.
School this.
Yeah.
I think I looked into this.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds great, but sure enough, I'm right out of undergrad, right? Which I went to straight from high school. So I was probably a little burnt out. And then here I am trying to go into a teach yourself law program. Well, you can imagine how that went.
Yeah.
But I tried. I did it for a year and a half, actually. But the way it works is because it's an unaccredited law school, it's a 4-year program. And after the first year, you have to take the baby bar.
Oh, yeah.
Which has now been made famous by Kim Kardashian. who's consistently trying to pass that baby bar.
Yeah.
And so it's like a mini version of the bar, and you have to take it after your first year just to keep going. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't
I've heard
give
it's
you
insanely hard.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. It has like a 20% passage rate, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give you anything other than you can keep going to law school. And it's just nuts. And it's like $800 for the exam. So it's like a crazy route. And of course, I didn't really realize that when I've signed up. But, at that point, I'm like 6 months in and I'm like, well, it is what it is. I'm going to go for it. But I don't know. I didn't put in the time. And honestly, I don't think law school should be teach yourself. Obviously, there's a lot of work you have to put into it, but there's especially that first year, like
First year's the hardest. You have to change your mindset.
Exactly. And a professor or professors have to teach you that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, sure enough, I went and sat for the baby bar in Pasadena and took it, failed it. Didn't pass it.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm a pretty committed person, tenacious person. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going. And so, I kept taking my classes. I started the second year of classes and I was like, okay, I'll just take it again. Of course, it's offered at random. It's like October and February is when it's offered. And so I took it again in February and I thought, I'm really going to study this time. I'm going to, go for it. Sat for it, got my results, didn't pass. Oh. And it was only by points that I didn't pass.
That's almost worse when it's so close.
Literally, I know. I would have rather have
I just would have chosen this answer. Instead.
I would have rather just bombed it.
And then you're like, it's just not meant to be.
But just by points. Yeah. And so I was so discouraged. And so by that point, we're a year and a half out from undergrad. And I was so discouraged. And I actually thought law school isn't for me. Mm-hmm. And so that was probably 2016 or 2017, around there. And so, I just quit. I just gave up. In fact, the school kicked me out because I didn't pass the baby bar. So that made it kind of easy.
It was easier to give up.
It was easier to give up.
You're like, you can't kick me out.
Right? And they're like, no, we kicked you out. And so, so that was it. And I thought, okay, I tried. I gave it my best shot, although I knew I didn't really, but whatever. At that point, I felt like I had.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I just was done. And I thought that was the end of my education. So after that, it just total. I thought, okay, I'm going to go.
Give up on everything.
I did. I was like, I'm done with school. And honestly, I was over it by that point, having done back-to-back school and then not passing. So I thought, I'm just going to go teach English.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do.
English?
I sure did.
Now, I know that at some point you went to Australia.
I did.
Did you teach English there, or was that for something else?
No. So Australia was just for fun, and that's where I met my husband. And
some good fun.
Yes, it was. It was a great trip. Very productive. So honestly, that's what happened. I started teaching English. My church has a homeschool co-op. So I started teaching English for middle schoolers. I met my husband. We had a long distance relationship. He ended up for a year. And then he ended up moving over here. We got married and that was my life. I was just married and teaching English to 6 middle schoolers. And part of me was, happy with that. And obviously I, loved getting married and that was exciting. But sure enough, there was always something kind of in me that just wasn't satisfied. Yeah. I don't know. It just wasn't fulfilling. I still felt like I was just missing something. And so sure enough, I thankfully married a really great guy and he was concerned about me. So a year after we had been married, he kind of just knew I wasn't happy with what I was doing. And I just kept feeling like there should be more to my life. And so he actually was praying one day for me and kind of was just like, God, what do you, have for Megan? And what's the plan that you have for her life? And all of a sudden law school popped into his head. And so I remember he came to me later that day and he was like, babe, I was praying about you and law school popped in my head for you. And my first response was nope.
Hell no.
I was like, I've been there, done that. That really was my first response.
Oh, I know. When my husband recommended me trying again,
Yeah.
I said no first.
Right. Yeah.
But that part in your heart is still there for it. You know you
Totally.
want to do it, but you
I mean, like, part of me was excited when he said that, but the other part of me was like, no. And I literally told him, I was like, no, I tried and I failed. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I really think you should, think about it. And so it was funny. I started to because like you said, part of me was like, it was still in there. So part of me was
just like
excited.
And
so I started to look into it. And sure enough, that's when I found Trinity Law School by just like Googling. And I saw that Trinity had a Master's of Legal Studies program.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, what if I just did that? It's not law school. So maybe it would be a little bit easier.
Sample version.
Yeah. And I can just do that. And so I remember going back to my husband and being like, babe, I really think I should do this Master's of Legal Studies. And he was like, nope.
That's not law school.
Yep. He was like, you need to do law school. And I remember thinking
close to the line, but not
right. And it wasn't exactly what
it was a safe zone. Right?
It was totally it was safe. It was comfortable, but that's not what God had for me. And my husband was so thankfully, he was so confident. He's like, no, you need to go to law school. Yeah. And so I remember I digested it for a little bit, but then I started to look into it. But I knew as I started to look into it that things needed to be different this time around. And one of the biggest things was I needed to go the traditional route. So I needed to go to a brick and mortar law school. I wanted to take the LSAT. I wanted to do the typical steps, steps to do it. And I guess that's one benefit because I don't necessarily regret my first experience with law school because I did learn a lot from it. And I think one of the things that it taught me was what doesn't work for me. And so in that sense, I was grateful for it. And so I knew, no, I need life classes. I need professors. I need classmates. And I, at the time, so at this point, I was 27. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was 27 years old at this point, and I was like, okay, I want a 3-year program. And, I don't want to do a 4-year program. And because that was another consideration, though. I thought, am I too old for this to start at 27? And it's funny, every person I talked to was like, are you crazy? Like, no, of course you're not too old.
No.
But it's, I guess just from movies or TV or society, there's this sense that you get that you have to do it straight out of college, Right
after your undergrad.
Right after your undergrad.
Start your career.
Yeah.
Like medical school. Otherwise, those are wasted.
Right. And I remember even looking it up and reading that you're less likely to succeed if you start later on. So even Google.
I'm glad I didn't read that because I started at 40.
I know. And so I'm so glad I didn't let that persuade me. But it was actually, my friend said something amazing to me that pushed it over the edge. She said, either way, because I said I'll be done by the time I'm 30, which is so fun. I'm over 30 now, and that's not old, but at the time, I'm like, that sounds so far away. And she was like, either way, you're going to turn 30. So you can either turn 30 with a law degree.
Exactly.
Or you can turn 30 not with a law degree and have your life be exactly the same. And I was like, you're right. She's right. That made so much sense. And I knew I wanted the law degree. And so, so I started looking into the LSAT and started studying for it. And then it was amazing though. The way I kind of knew that this is what God had for me was that doors just were opening. Left and right. And so I found Trinity, which is such an amazing school. They have an amazing scholarship program because one thing that I was concerned about was me and my husband were newly married. He was finishing his degree in architecture from the University of Melbourne in Australia. So, and we were living in my parents' attic. So both working part-time. He was a student. Nice. I wasn't making much money working for my church, as the English teacher.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't know if we can take on over $150,000 of student debt.
Yeah.
For law school.
Kidney or something.
Right. No big deal. So same issue. So that, I really was concerned about the money and whatnot. And sure enough, I found Trinity has an amazing scholarship program that based off of your LSAT score, they can give you certain scholarships. So I ended up studying my butt off for the LSAT, took it, and my score allowed me to get the full tuition scholarship from Trinity with a stipend.
Wonderful. That's really good.
I didn't pay a penny for law school. And it was just...
I didn't even know that. But that is so great.
Yeah, I like to joke that they paid me.
That's really cool.
To go to law
That's
school.
Good that you told me after we've already paid. I'm like, what?
I know. I didn't really share that detail.
No, that's good. You kept it to yourself. I'm your friend, but I would be a little on the jealous side. Like, oh,
yeah, it was that. But I took that as a sign from God. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I mean, it was just everything got taken care of. And it was so amazing. I started it. The professors were amazing. My classes, I mean, everything just fit. And I knew this is what I was supposed to do. You know, like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up in law school for the second time.
That's great. I mean, obviously, like you said, the path that you had, the discouragement and everything, and a little bit about mine. Like I started originally a long time ago, and then my family passing away and stuff, so I left. But that first year helped me understand what law school looks like.
Right.
Because at that point, it still was a long time from being in a traditional classroom. And so I had no idea. And I've written stuff before, but I had to change the way I write, I had to change the way I learn and study and think.
Totally.
And it hurt. It hurt your brain a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a lot of tears, like, I don't know if you've cried. I know I've cried. I know other people cried.
Yeah.
And it's not just that. It's just like you think how to do something.
Right.
And you find, nope, that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's not how you do it for this particular thing.
Yeah.
And, but I think I've told others, I'm like, I feel like the first year law school should be the trial run anyway.
I know, right?
Like it's the one where you have
really
to revert everything to changing to relearning. Like, we need that trial run. It shouldn't count. And it feels like the hardest.
It does.
Even though the other semesters and the other years are also hard, and especially that last semester where everything is like, I got to finish the finish line. That just feels the most soul crushing.
It really does. It can be very discouraging because you fail a lot. Because everything's so new. And so I remember, because I was always a pretty good student. I always got good grades in high school and undergrad. And so I remember the first paper or something that I submitted, and my professor just ripped that thing to shreds. And I was so devastated.
Oh, I know.
And being like, what in the world? But then I remember I don't know, I had so many people around me, which was so key, that just encouraged me. And they were like, you're learning, you're new. And what's so great is I had amazing professors who also constantly reminded us of that. Like, you're learning, this is all new to you. You're literally changing how you think. You're not going to get it all off the bat. There is that trial period of figuring things out, and that's okay. And that's honestly something I wish I would have, I don't know, I would have known earlier on. I think I wouldn't have been as stressed out.
Yeah.
Just knowing that it does get easier. You will get it, but it just takes time.
Yeah, exactly. How I started off in the first year of how I would study, how I would brief, totally changed my last year.
Totally.
And I mean, there were professors that weren't so great, or at least weren't very nice. And there were professors that were wonderful, amazing. Yeah. They will always be in my memory as being a great mentor. And then there's professors that were kind of both.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever had Clark.
I didn't.
He likes to write on your paper, barf.
Barf.
So,
Rude.
it's thanks a lot. You crushed me, but it also is a little funny, but you're like, that's terrible.
Right.
But after a while, you get used to that. You're like, whatever. I didn't get 2 barfs today. I only got 1 barf on my paper.
Wins.
I'm improving. So yeah, sometimes those professors, they have a way of fighting you that is not what we're used to.
And even in time, though, I think you learn to take that in stride, you know?
Yeah.
That's at least for my case, you know, like the more I got in it, the more experience I had with professors, I was able to learn, you know, the professors that were amazing and that, you know, I could just literally take everything they said and apply it. And then there were some professors that weren't that great. But either way, they all had something to offer. And it was a matter of just, you know, picking through it and finding what was valuable and discarding the rest.
Exactly. They're not gonna, and we're not just like we're not gonna be great in every subject,
right?
You know, we might do really good in one and not so great in another because we're not gonna practice every area of law,
right?
So to shift gears a little bit, you did have some other struggles while you were in law school. Can we talk a little bit about that and what you went through? You can start at any point in your struggle, either the beginning or towards the last semester. But
totally. Yeah. So it's interesting because it was so easy getting into law school that I kind of just assumed that it was going to be easy throughout, and it was not. I had so many hardships that happened during law school that it was kind of just nuts. The first one was 6 months after I started law school. My husband had a seizure one morning, and it was completely random. He had never had any prior health issues. I remember it was in June. So I had started law school in January, and this was in June. It was on a Thursday morning. I had class that night, and he ended up having to be taken by ambulance to the hospital because it was a massive seizure. And our world just flipped upside down. All of a sudden. So actually, I remember emailing my professor that night and being like, I was in the hospital, actually still. I was still in the hospital. And I remember writing my professor in the afternoon and being like, I'm not going to make it to class tonight because my husband just had a seizure and we're in the hospital and I don't even know what to do and what this means. And I had just the absolute best professor who to this day I'm still so close with. And she was so kind and caring. And she was like, don't even worry about class. And, you know, I'm praying for you. And it was really encouraging, but it was such a scary time. And I remember thinking, how in the world am I going to handle, it was traumatic. It was really traumatic because I was sitting there when it happened. And so I remember I couldn't sleep for a week after that. And every noise, you know, made me jump. And so it was a really traumatic thing. And I remember thinking, how in the world am I going to do law school or even think about assignments, you know, in the midst of this? And sure enough, 2 weeks later, my husband had another seizure. And at that point, he was officially diagnosed with epilepsy. And again, he was a perfectly healthy 27-year-old, never had any prior health issues. And all of a sudden, he was having these awful seizures. And so that started us on a journey that we're still on today of meeting with neurologists and medications. And he ended up having several seizures after that point. And it was all throughout my law school career. It was such a crazy thing. But I remember thinking after it first happened, because I was, like I said, I was only 6 months in. And I remember thinking, I remember talking to my husband, should I put this on pause, you know, should I stop and just, you know, focus on your health and whatnot. And I remember him saying, no, we cannot let this disrupt, you know, God's plan for our lives.
Told him.
Yeah, totally. So he was like, no, you got to keep going. We're going to figure this out. And man, I'm not going to lie though. It was so stressful. It was so stressful. I remember, I think one of the times I had a final the next morning and he had a seizure that night and I was up all night and it was just it was just
so sorry you were going.
Yeah, it was a lot. But one thing that it made me, or one thing I see now that it built in me was just perseverance. It really, because I had to just make a decision. Okay, yes, our lives are now flipped upside down and we're having to figure out this new diagnosis and all these issues. But I know I'm supposed to do this. And so I just had to decide, I'm going to do this. I'm going to push through. I'm going to figure it out. Thankfully, my professors, if it ever did really conflict, my professors were willing to work with me. And I just realized I had to it was like a mental thing. I had to just, set my mind on it. And so I don't know, it sounds weird, but I'm actually kind of thankful for the process now. Because I feel like it really built things in me that wouldn't have been built without that struggle.
Yeah.
And without that process. Like, it's definitely made me like nerves of steel, and like it's definitely made me stronger. And so,
Like
for that way,
of pushing through and the lost degree meant something more, especially because your husband was the one who is God told him
totally,
rather than just told you.
Right.
You needed that.
Which was so key because it allowed us to really partner in it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like my dream, that he was just
your guys' dream, both of your dreams.
Exactly. And so that was really significant. And I'd love to say that was my only hardship during law school. I kind of feel like that would have been hard enough. But very tragically, in October of 2023, which would have been 2.5 months before I was to finish law school, my dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack. Yeah. And he was 56 years old, and also didn't really have any, health issues prior to that. And it just happened suddenly one morning. And so that was 2 months before I was supposed to finish law school, and 4 months before I was supposed to take the bar exam. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the very last text message that he sent me, was I had texted him and my mom, letting them know that I had registered for the bar exam. And the very last text message that he sent me was, "I know you're going to pass." And I know.
I'm sorry. That's great, because he knew.
Yeah.
He knew. And
it was actually, I'm really thankful that was the last thing, because, man, after that happened, I'd never really obviously experienced a traumatic, close death like that. And I seriously thought, there's no way I can continue. I can finish law school, and there's for sure no way that I can take the bar exam. I mean, that was my first thought. And I mean, that first month, I just pretty much shut down in grief, and again, thankfully, I had the best professors. And I remember, I just had 2 classes at the time because it was my last semester. Mm-hmm. And I'd emailed them both, and they were just both so understanding and caring, and they prayed for me and sent me scriptures of encouragement. And there was even other, professors and faculty at Trinity that did the same thing. And so that absolutely helped. But like I was saying, I'm kind of, in a way, I was thankful that was the last thing that he had texted me, because it helped me make my decision that no, actually, I am going to take the bar exam. Yeah. I'm going to try, and I'm going to do it in honor of him. And so I did. I actually, honestly, it was purely by the Lord's grace and his strength. I was able to just kind of compartmentalize. I finished out my degree, and then I started bar prep. And I honestly actually don't even know how I did it, other than it was really just the Lord and the support of my family. But I just set it in my mind, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in honor of my dad. And so I studied for it, sat for the bar exam, and I passed. Yeah,
I know. You passed, and you got, what was it, Student of the Year?
Yeah, I ended up graduating top of my class.
Top of your class.
And getting the Dean's Award.
You got an award.
Yeah.
And it, and I know I was really proud of you. I was there for graduation, and I already knew what you were going to get that award.
Yeah. You got the inside track.
I had the inside information, keeping that to myself. But I was so proud of you. I'm like, I know her. But I also know how hard you worked. I've had classes with you and you were always there. I know how much like the stuff that you were going on behind the scenes. Maybe you didn't always share with everyone else, but
Right.
again, I had some inside
Yeah.
stuff. So
Right.
I was always praying for you. And, but I know how that grief can just knock the air and life out of you as somebody who experienced the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it is hard to keep going.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely hard. And I think that your first time around, you didn't have those same hiccups in your life.
Right.
But it felt really hard then.
Yeah.
But this time you had the two most important men in your life tell you to keep going.
Yeah.
And even though your dad had passed on, his message, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And his message was pretty much to
Right.
tell you to do that, to pass.
Totally.
It was amazing. I mean, you were so great that you passed on the first time. And the California bar is insanely hard.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't pass the first time.
Right.
It's okay if you don't pass the first time.
Yeah, and honestly, I was okay. I honestly didn't expect to pass. The place that I was in with grieving and shock and trauma, I just was hoping to just sit for it, I had no idea whether I'd pass or not, but I remember praying and telling the Lord, like, okay, Lord, you brought me to law school. You have brought me this far. So if you want me to become an attorney, then help me pass this exam.
Yeah.
And I know that's pure, like truly what it was, is he just helped me do it. And so, I wasn't even expecting to pass. I was so surprised. But I was also so thankful because I remember on the very last day of the exam, we had just finished the last session. And I remember, they told us to close our books. And I closed my books and I just started bawling because I think everything that I had pent up and held in towards that point, I knew I could finally just
let it go.
And I just sat the people next to me, although there's a lot of people that cry in the bar exam. So I actually didn't seem that out of place, but the people next to me were probably like, whoa, as I'm over here just like bawling. But I knew I just needed to do it. I just had to sit for it. And thankfully I was, ended up being able to pass, and that was such a blessing.
And now you're working as an attorney. You had
I am.
a few offers like right away at graduation. And you were able to, God blessed you again by providing a great opportunity.
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah.
And now that what if has been answered.
Yeah.
You don't have that anymore because you know that you were supposed to, and this is the path you were meant to. And you've met some, people along the way.
Yeah.
And so your husband listening to God was a good
Huge
thing. So that's great. What kind of tips and things would you say that you would, encourage others or any other words of encouragement for other people that might be like you, whether they've had your path or something similar, or just going through grief and hardship and they want to give up as well.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be law school. It could just be whatever those dreams that they have. What would you offer that to people?
Yeah. I think obviously everyone is different. Everyone's path is different. Everyone's circumstances are different. But one thing that I'm so thankful for from my journey, obviously I would not, have wished for any of those hardships. But they really did build me, they really did build a strength in me that obviously the Lord knew that I needed, or that I need for life. And so I think, my encouragement would be to just really know your why, like why you're doing something. And if you know your why, to just stick with it. I think so much of it was honestly just having to decide or make a decision. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to push through. I'm not going to, let discouragement of failing the baby bar make me quit. I'm not going to let, the hardships of life make me quit. I just made a decision that no, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I want to do. And I'm going to go for it. And I honestly, one of my mantras, throughout law school, that I repeated to myself often was, I can do hard things. And I remember just telling myself that I can do hard things. And it's funny, it actually came from, there was this time where I was, really struggling with, if I could do the bar or not. And I was with my husband at a pool, and it was like in November, so it was freezing. And he wanted me to get into the pool to do like a cold plunge type thing. Oh. And I remember telling him, no way, I hate the cold. Like, I can't do it. I just kept saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. And he's like, no, you can do it. You can do it. Just do it. Trust me. And I'm like, nope. And I had it just so fixed in my mind that I couldn't do it. And I was shaping my reality by those words. And sure enough, he made me jump in. And it was so cold. I remember being shocked at first. It was so freezing. And then I remember standing there and being like, oh, I'm actually okay. Like, this is okay.
You didn't die.
I didn't die. I didn't die. I was able to do this. And that's where I, remembered the phrase, I can do hard things, And so I think my encouragement for those that are maybe like struggling or they're going through hardship, obviously everyone has to do at the end of the day what, is best for them. But if you know that this is, whatever it is that you're doing, if you know that that's what you're supposed to do, then it's so much of the mind. And my encouragement is to really set your mind and let your words shape reality. So instead of this is too hard or I can't do it, change it to no, I can do it. I can do hard things. I can get through this. And really speak truth into your environment. Because what I found for myself is it absolutely shapes the success of your life. And honestly, our life is what we make of it, And so, my encouragement is to just all those discouragements and those things that try to come in and get you off track, they have to just be done away with.
Yeah.
And really, set it. And then obviously surround yourself with people who echo the same thing. I think is so important.
I agree. And I think that is excellent words of wisdom, and the surrounding yourself too, either influence or be influenced.
Yeah.
If you're not influencing others, they're influencing you.
Absolutely.
It's great to have a good positive environment. Hence why we're friends.
Absolutely.
I think your story, your struggles are very inspiring. And that's why I wanted to bring you here, and I wanted you to tell that story so other people can have that hope and that strength as well.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for those tips and sharing your story with us.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you. Thanks for joining us on this episode Beyond the Casebooks podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Online Law Coach for updates and behind the scenes content. You can also watch full episodes and more on our YouTube channel, The Online Law Coach. Don't forget to subscribe to Beyond the Casebooks podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to stay up to date on new episodes. We'd love for you to leave a review and share your thoughts. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, keep redefining the road to law school.